So we've done the two most competitive of the market structures, perfect competition and monopolistic competition. So now we're going to move to the other end of our competition spectrum and look at monopoly. Monopoly at one level is a straightforward term. Yeah, it means mono meaning one. There's only one firm, but that doesn't really reflect the real world very much. Yeah, there are very, very, very few industries where there's literally only one firm, and therefore you'll see that there are a variety of different terms surrounding monopoly. And if you end up writing about it, it's important to distinguish between the different types of monopoly that there might be. The most obvious one is what's called So if we look at the types of monopoly, the most obvious one is what's called a pure monopoly, which is pretty much as it sounds. What it means is that one firm has 100% of the market, and there are very, very few examples. There's probably in the UK the closest example is things like regional water companies. So I have no choice other than to get my water from Thames Water, because that's it. There is literally only one firm. I have no choice. And that's what we mean. That's what we mean by pure monopoly. A firm that has a 100% market share. But there aren't very many of those. On some rail networks, again, until the government I guess when the government renationalises the railways, as it says it's going to do, then that will be a pure monopoly. At the moment, kind of certain train routes, for example. So only one firm, I think First Great Western, has the licence to run a train service to Wales. So, but generally, you don't tend to get that so much. So, on the other hand, we do get firms, which pretty much we would view as a monopoly. So you look at kind of Google in search, and we'll see how that goes. But Google in search, or kind of Chrome. I suppose. But there are certain firms, Amazon in kind of online retail in Europe and the US, there are certain firms where you say, well, really, they are a monopoly. And so a second term that you're going to come across is the idea of what's called a working monopoly. And interestingly, if you search online for kind of what it is that that a working monopoly is, there's no real agreement. Some magic figure, of kind of one dominant firm, with maybe a 25% plus market share of the market, so the percentage of either revenue or volume that it has, with no major competition. But it's not clear at all, so no major other competition. It's not clear at all where that definition has come from. But we're talking about firms like, as I say, Amazon in online, or you're talking about kind of Google at the moment, particularly in things like search. Really, those firms, they are dominant. But you might say that it's not like there's no competition, and in some cases, in search, Google is dominant, but there are as kind of AI starts to become more significant in search, then they are going to face competition. Amazon doesn't have a global monopoly and so on, and there is some sense in which they're tending towards oligopoly, which we haven't looked at yet, which we will, but it's a market dominated by a few large firms. So those are the two most useful to you kind of definitions. But there is a third type of monopoly that everybody messes up. And the third type is what's called a natural monopoly. A natural monopoly is quite confusing. It might or might not be a pure monopoly. This is the key point. But a natural monopoly, it's an industry or a market, industrial market where it would be inefficient to have more than one firm. That's not to say there isn't more than one firm. We're just saying it would be inefficient if you did. And the reason is that you've got very high kind of fixed costs, setup costs, sunk costs, very high fixed costs, and the potential for huge economies of scale, internal economies of scale. And what that means is that suppose this was the industry demand. So that's the total industry demand, and we'll call that like 100% market share there or something, where literally everybody who would buy it does because price is zero. Suppose your long run average cost curve, looks something like this. How many firms do you want in the market? If you're gonna be efficient. Well, if you have one firm here, which basically has the whole market, then costs are down at C1. If you broke that market into two, and give each firm sort of half of it, costs rise to C2. If you broke it into four, the cost per unit rises to C3. That isn't to say that we don't do this. It's just saying it wouldn't be efficient if you did. So the examples that you tend to get are things that often are monopolies. So if you take water, it's kind of you only really want one set of pipes. It would be crazy to dig up the roads and install 2 or 3 sets of water pipes under the streets. But given that would be crazy, it would be inefficient. You would say, well, naturally this ought to be a monopoly. You might then add to that, and therefore naturally the government should probably run it because it's going to be impossible to introduce competition into those sorts of markets. Or another one that's sometimes given is kind of rail, where you don't want 2 sets of tracks. So, and again, although we have introduced kind of competition into the rail industry, it's in a very weird sort of way, where you have one company that kind of owns the tracks and other companies that bid to use them and so on, and that's one of the reasons the Labour government said that it's planning to renationalise the train sector. So what does that mean? Let's go back. So we're saying there are three main types of monopoly. Pure, where one firm literally has all the market, and we'll start off by talking about that and then diversify a bit into a working monopoly, where you've got one big firm but it does face competition. And we'll talk about natural monopolies along the way. But remember, just because something's a natural monopoly, just because it would be inefficient to have more than one firm, doesn't mean that there isn't more than one firm. So pure and natural, be very clear. Pure, there is one firm. Natural, there should be one firm. So given this, what you'll tend to see is that how do I become a monopoly? The answer is there have got to be barriers to entry, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And firms in monopoly, because in a pure monopoly there's only the one firm, they have a lot of price setting power. So if you talk about their key characteristics, there are 2 key ones. One, there are barriers to entry, not just in the short run. We said there are always barriers to entry in the short run. There are now barriers to entry in the long run. And secondly, firms have price setting power. There's only one or a very small number of firms, therefore they can drive prices up. And we'll examine each of those features in the next videos.